Hello and welcome to Storytime with Mr. Laws. Today we're reading Fintan Fedora, the World's Worst Explorer by Clive Goddard. Chapter 23. Later that evening, Wrench and Gonzales set up their camp some distance away from the Bumsteads. They may have been on the same side, but neither pair trusted the other, and besides, Wrench couldn't stand the smell. Eric and Edith had decided to spend the night wallowing in a muddy pool to help ease the pain of their ant bites. They were so distracted by the mass of little burning itches all over them that they didn't even notice they were sharing the pond with a few hundred leeches. Furious, miserable, and racked with pain, they sat in the mud and consoled themselves by imagining the violent things they would do to Fintan first thing in the morning. Gonzales and Max Wrench, meanwhile, were attempting to apply ointment to some of their bites by torchlight when the satellite phone rang. It was Randall, and he wasn't happy. "Wrench, listen to me," he hollered from the safety and comfort of his plush New York office. "You're making me look a fool here. You promised me you'll get the fruit, and yet I'm not hearing any good news. There's a major publicity event underway here, and you're coming up with nothing but excuses."
"No, you listen to me," Wrench snarled back. "I told you I'd get to the fruit trees before the kid, and I will. Trust me, okay? This isn't easy, you know."
Randall wasn't listening. He was impatient to see results for his massive investment. The fact that he'd already notified the press about his remarkable discovery before having anything to show for it didn't help matters.
"Not easy? I'll tell you what's not easy, Mr. Wrench. Having to deal with the newspapers and TV networks. That's not easy. I'm under immense pressure here to come up with something to show them, and you're not providing it. It's all very well for you sitting around down there in the sunshine, Wrench, but this is really tough for me. If you want to keep your job, you better come up with the goods by tomorrow."
This short but frank exchange of views did little to help Wrench's mood. He slammed the phone down and resumed dabbing at his injuries. By the time he crawled angrily into his sleeping bag, he had vowed that first thing in the morning he would take drastic action. Which he did. Driven half insane by another cold, uncomfortable night, made worse by several hundred stinging ant bites, a mad-eyed Max Wrench rose at dawn, picked up his gun, and set off intent on revenge. It was a dull, murky morning, and pouring with incredibly heavy rain, which is fairly normal in a rainforest, but Wrench barely noticed. With a single-minded anger surging through his sleep-deprived mind, he squelched through the forest, focused intently on his mission. Fintan and Gribbly were still fast asleep when he crashed into their camp.
"Get up, kid," he bellowed. "This is your early morning alarm call."
Fintan groggily opened one eye and peered out through his mosquito net. There was a large, angry, bald-headed man with a goatee beard pointing a gun at him. Needless to say, this was a new experience.
"Get up, both of you,"
repeated Wrench at full volume. At that point, it dawned on Fintan that he'd met the angry, shouty man before. He'd been on the ship with him, though why he was now threatening them at gunpoint in the jungle wasn't immediately obvious. "Why?" said Fintan, still half asleep. "What time is it?"
"Never mind what time it is, you dumb idiot. Just get out of there and put your hands up."
Fintan and Gribbly clambered groggily down from their hammocks and did as they were told. Wearing only their pyjamas and wet socks, the pair of them stood in the tropical downpour with their hands up. Wrench was grinning dementedly, and his gun arm was shaking with excitement. Gribbly had absolutely no idea who the man was or why he had so rudely awoken them. Unbelievable as it seemed, they were about to be robbed by a strange bald-headed American man covered in cuts and scratches with mad staring eyes in the middle of the Brazilian rainforest. Things like this only happened if you spent time with Fintan.
"Not so smart now, eh?" said Wrench, enjoying his sudden upper hand. "Not so brave now you got a gun in your face, huh?"
Fintan was alarmed to say the least, and also a bit miffed, as he had been really enjoying his lie-in. "What do you want?" he asked, genuinely confused.
"Ha! Still think you're the funny kid, huh? You know exactly what I want, and you're going to give it to me right now.
Fintan still looked blank. Gribbly looked even blanker. I'm sorry, sir, he ventured cautiously, but I'm afraid you may have mistaken us for some other people. I can assure you we have nothing of value.
Shut up, flunky,
barked Wrench, waving his gun around madly, then returning his attention to Fintan.
After all you've done to me, boy, you should consider yourself lucky I don't just kill you right here and now. And your stupid flunky guy, too. I ought to let you die in this stinking jungle. No one would know. Now open your bag real slow and don't try any tricks, okay?
Fintan stood with his hands above his head and sleepily wondered what he had in his bag that this horribly ill-looking man could possibly want. Is it the sandwiches? He asked vaguely. I've got plenty of them, so you're welcome to have
the map, dummy, spat Wrench. Give me that map.
Fintan frowned. After all, this was the man who only a few days earlier had said the chocoplums were a big joke. The man who had laughed at him and made fun of him, but now for some reason he completely changed his mind. Fintan didn't like him one bit and certainly didn't want to give him the map. No, why should I? He said, more out of stupidity than bravery. Wrench steadied the gun in both hands and aimed at Fintan's face.
Because if you don't give me the map, I'm gonna shoot you.
Fintan considered this for a moment, exchanged glances with Gribbly, and decided it seemed like a pretty good reason. Reluctantly, he ferreted around in his bag and produced Anna's crumpled sheet of paper. Without lowering his gun for a moment, Wrench snatched it from him.
Now that's the first sensible thing you've done, kid,
he said triumphantly, and began backing away into the jungle.
Listen up. If you try and follow me, I'll shoot you dead, understand? I got the map now, so you don't stand a chance. I get the fruit trees, and you losers get to wander around lost in this big old jungle till you die. You made me suffer, now it's your turn. Still grinning like a maniac and staring with his horribly bloodshot eyes, Wrench disappeared into the thick undergrowth and was gone. Apart from the steady drumming of heavy rain on the jungle foliage, silence returned to Fintan's camp. They put their arms down and stood motionless in stunned surprise. Were you acquainted with the American gentleman, sir? Inquired Gribbly. He appeared to be quite familiar with you. Well, not really, Gribbs. I did meet him on the ship, though. He works for some big cake company. Gribbly still wasn't clear why an apparent stranger, who turned out to be a business rival, would appear from nowhere, take their map and threaten to kill them. It appeared you had done something to rather upset him, sir. Do you recall what that might have been? Beats me, shrugged Fintan. All I did was spoil his dinner a bit. Knocked his wine over. Nothing serious or anything. Bit of an overreaction, if you ask me. He must really like that lobster thermostat stuff. After a while, they attempted to find some dry clothes, get themselves organised, and consider what they were going to do next. There was no doubt in Fintan's mind that this was a major blow. Losing the map had ruined everything. Not only had they lost all chance of getting to the chocoplums, they were now stuck in the middle of the biggest rainforest on Earth with no idea of the way out. What are we going to do without a map, Gribbs? Said Fintan, sounding extremely worried. That's not a problem, sir, announced Gribbly with his usual calm. I thought it might be wise to make a copy in case the original were to be lost. There's one rolled up in my pack. Fintan clapped Gribbly on the back. Brilliant, he said. What would I do without you, eh, Gribbs? Chapter 24. Wrench grinned madly at the scruffy little hand-drawn map in his trembling hands, switched on his satellite phone, and took out his very expensive digital camera. The directions Anna had drawn weren't very clear, but he was able to recognize some distinct features which corresponded with his map of the area. He took a photograph of it, then relayed the image to Operation Harvest Field headquarters, which should be hurriedly assembled on the outskirts of Santos Coelho. Giganti Foods International had flown in enough men, weaponry, heavy machinery and computer equipment to start a small war, and now it seemed
they finally had the information they needed to spring into action. A small group of technicians fired up their solar-powered laptops, and a digital image of the map was superimposed over their existing satellite data. It was cross-checked, and an approximate grid reference was quickly established. There was a flurry of activity, and within minutes an advanced helicopter mission was dispatched to the Grove's coordinates to establish visual confirmation.
Keep me informed, okay?
Said Wrench to one of the technicians at Field HQ.
I want to direct the operation from the front line, so come get me as soon as we get word from the advanced mission.
The plan that Max Wrench and Randall T. Buckmeister had devised between them was simple, nasty, and selfish. As soon as the Grove was located, they would drop in a ground clearance force from helicopters who would hack out a massive landing area with chainsaws. Because of the huge distances involved, they would need to set up several refueling points in the jungle and organised almost constant supply trips back and forth to base camp. But as money was no object and environmental damage didn't particularly bother them, this was no problem. Wrench would then be located, winched up, and flown to the Grove to take command. He would make sure the area was thoroughly searched and mapped to make sure nothing was missed. It was, after all, a total removal mission. Soil samples would be taken and the air temperature and humidity levels recorded. Generators would be winched into position and powerful arc lamps erected for security. Perimeter guards with enormous guns would patrol the area in case of incursions from their competitors, which basically meant shooting Fintan Fedora if he came too close. The next stage would involve another wave of larger helicopters, which would bring in the machinery for carefully uprooting every single one of the trees, packaging them and preparing them for transit. The final and nastiest phase of Operation Harvest would involve destroying any possibility of the trees springing up again in case someone else got their hands on them. The ground would be neutralized with flamethrowers, burnt, pulverized, poisoned, and left completely lifeless. The world of fruitcakes was, as previously mentioned, a very, very serious business. The angry, impatient phone calls from Randall T. Buckmeister had been getting more and more frequent, so it was with some pleasure that Wrench prepared to report this great advance back to head office. He was just reaching for the satellite phone when the red channel rang. It was Barbara.
"How do you get through on this line?" demanded Wrench. "This is for top secret communications only."
Never you mind how I got the number, Max, said Barbara's grating voice. I just wanted to call to let you know I'm having a wonderful time without you. Right now I'm relaxing in the beautiful Rio de Janeiro sunshine. I'm lying on a lounger beside my luxury hotel's luxury pool, and I'm drinking my third pina colada. It's luxury, you hear?
Riveting as this was, Wrench had no interest in listening to his annoying wife rub his nose in any further.
Yeah, not now, Barbara, he barked. You gotta get off the line. I need to speak to Randall urgently.
He hung up and punched in the number for Mission HQ.
Randall, he announced triumphantly, Operation Harvest is underway.
That's all for now. I'll see you tomorrow for another couple of chapters.